All right, folks, we're going to get started. We got some folks online. Thank you for joining us and everybody here in the room. We're going to talk about the Lake St. Catherine Stormwater Master Plan. And we've got Pulteney Meadowy here today, and Sadie and Vicky. And we've got Evan from Evan Fitzgerald, who's the environmental engineer, and he's going to go over some of the project designs. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about just really briefly what a stormwater master plan is, tell you about the Lake St. Catherine Stormwater Master Plan. We'll talk about how we got the funding for this grant, which was the designs you're going to see today were helped to be funded through a $50,000 grant that Pulteney Meadowy and Lake St. Catherine Association worked on a grant for. These are the areas where we're going to go through the project designs. And then we'll have a quick Q&A and talk about next steps at the end of the presentation. So the stormwater master planning process is used to identify stormwater inputs to surface waters. And you can see right here, this outline shows you the watershed of Lake St. Catherine. So everything inside this boundary goes into the lake. So it's while it's important to work on things inside the lake and what's going on in the lake, it's also very important to work in the watershed because that's everything is flowing directly into the lake at some point with stormwater. So the Stormwater Master Plan is large projects designed to keep phosphorus sediments and pollutants out of Lake St. Catherine. So some folks were part of the Lake Watershed Action Plan meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago. That also looks to do those same things, but also focuses on the watershed and a huge study of the watershed. And we just released the draft of that, which is on our website. So please take a look at that. It's getting submitted at the end of the month. So we'd love everybody to take a look at that and send any comments they may have about that before we send it in. So as I mentioned, the Stormwater Master Plan was created through extensive field work by Pulteney Meadowy Natural Resources Conservation District and Fitzgerald Environmental between 2018 and 2019. At that time, 50 sites were identified that there was an issue of stormwater coming into the lake. And initially, as part of that initial project, 6 projects were designed and implemented. So what we're going to talk about today are 10 to 12-ish more that were funded as part of the grant that we talked about at the beginning. So yep, there's that $50,000 grant that the Lake St. Catherine Association and Pulteney Meadowy worked on a couple of years ago. We did have a lake community meeting back in September of 2023. And at that time, we looked at the projects that were still part of the Stormwater Master Plan. And the next set were picked by the community at that time. So those selections went to Evan, and then he started working on the designs for those projects. Those have been completed, and those are what we're going to take a look at tonight. And if you want to learn more about the Stormwater Master Plan, that's the link on our website. So it's lakestcatherine.org/stormwater-master-plan. And so we also want to mention our funders. So the Lake St. Champlain Basin Program and NEWPC, NEIWPCC. They are the ones that funded this grant that we applied for. Jesus, was probably 2 years ago now. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Hillary, and she's going to say a few things, and then we'll hand it over to Evan to show you the designs. Thanks, Hillary.
Hey there. Most of you probably know me, Hillary Solomon with Pulteney Meadowy Conservation District. So as a conservation district, we like to work with landowners, and if there's a water quality issue that's been identified or some type of pollution issue that a landowner wants to address, we like to help find resources to help that landowner address that issue. And so when we have a project like the Stormwater Master Plan that identifies 50 projects, but only 6 are able to be funded at that time, we don't want to lose track of those projects. We really want to go back and revisit that list. And so I was very grateful when we received funds to do this.
We don't hear you if you can hear me.
Shoot. Yes, I can hear you. Can you?
I hear you now.
Oh, you can't. So if I face the computer, it's better.
We can hear you, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyhow, at different times we have different abilities to fund a project. So it's nice that we keep up with this project list. And as Jeremy mentioned, the Lake Watershed Action Plan is a more inclusive study. We looked at wetlands and we looked at streams and we looked at roads and we looked, around the watershed at the shoreline of the lake. So there's two potential documents that you could look at on the Lake St. Catherine website, but the Lake Watershed Action Plan might be the one to look at, and look at the appendices, because all our field work and all our notes and photos and things are in those appendices. So those, I think. Anyhow, so years ago, and
You're gone again. You're cutting in and out.
shoot. Okay, I'm sorry. It was then to look at those designs that were created for these project areas, and we were hoping that some of the landowners involved, some of the landowners were at the first meeting, and we were hoping they would be here tonight so that they could sort of see the designs, and then we could visit them after. So I'm going to hand it over to Evan, who created the designs, and he'll walk us through them. And I think his voice is louder than mine, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it for those of you online.
Yeah, if you cannot hear me, Jeremy's certain that it's picking up on the mic, but if just give us a shout if you can't hear me. So, all right. Hello, everybody. I'm Evan Fitzgerald, and as Jeremy indicated on some of the first slides, we've been working around the lake for 7 or 8 years now, I guess. Started around 2017, 18, and actually today I was going through my photographs to populate the slides, and I noticed a bunch of them from 2018 and 2019, I think right after some floods, like in May 2019. I saw some pretty gnarly erosion at some of these sites that when I compared the photographs from that time to today, they look very different. And I was just going through my memory of all the floods and storms that have happened. I think, wasn't there a pretty large storm in April or May 2019? Yeah. So anyways, some of these sites that did experience a lot of erosion then that look a little better now, kind of interesting to compare. And they are, even if they do look a little bit better now, it's a good reminder that they are very susceptible to erosion. So we have 12 designs that I'm going to go through, and where we're at with these is a conceptual design level. So sometimes we say 30% design. If you think about, from having nothing to 100% constructible design or construction drawings, we're about a third of the way through. So it's at this stage, we're making sure it's a feasible project, that the footprint of the project is appropriate, that the different elements of the practice, stone, plants, the relative size of the basin, et cetera, are appropriate and can fit in the space. And we begin to look at the cost as well at this phase. So as I go through these, I'm not going to identify, I'm going to be careful to not identify any landowners. I think in past meetings I have mentioned names. We don't want anybody, if they feel uncomfortable, to feel compelled saying if we are talking about your property, we do want your input. It doesn't have to be tonight. If you have something to say about our observations or what we're proposing, certainly feel free to raise your hand, or if you're online, you can chime in. But it's perfectly fine if you want to wait and follow up, at a later date with an email or whatever, or a phone call. So with that said, we will get into the designs. So I rearranged these slides, Jeremy. I figured we'd go in a predictable pattern. So we're going to start on the north side of the lake on Ferncliff Road and then go counterclockwise around the lake. So the first number of projects, we kind of considered it a bundle of projects, but we do have individual designs for each of them. And the FCR stands for Ferncliff Road, and then IVL, Ivy Lane. The reason they're bundled together is because many of them contribute drainage from one to the next. So it's important when you're thinking about stormwater to think about how all the flow is accumulating and how to better manage it. So this is an overview slide of the Ferncliff and Ivy Lane projects. Here's Ferncliff, and I know folks online can't see this. So Ferncliff Road, here's the end of Ferncliff Road. Here's Ivy Lane. On all of these slides I'm going to show, the purple lines are the drainage areas. So these are the contributing areas to the practice. And there's always going to be an acreage tied to that. So if you can see this, you can kind of get a feel for how big the drainage area is coming to the project. So some are very small, for example, out here at the end, and some are very large, over 10 acres. So I'm gonna start at the very west end and kind of work my way east. Okay, so now I need my cheat sheet for addresses. So I won't mention names, but I'll mention the addresses. So this is FCR 1B, and the reason it's called 1B is because we did a project on this property on the other side of the residence in 2020 or 21. And there's another sort of portion of the drainage that comes down the west side of the residence. And these were what we thought were steps that were placed where the runoff is coming down the driveway and kind of exiting onto the grass. Excuse me, exiting onto the grass. And we thought these were maybe intended to be infiltration steps. In other words, steps that can kind of receive the runoff and get it into the ground below. But I'm not sure if they weren't backfilled. Anyways, in the design, we included some recommendations for how to better backfill these and get them to receive stormwater better. Also, and so here's the layout view. And again, the purple lines are the contributing areas. Here's the residence. This is 1373 Ferncliff. The project that was implemented in 2020 is over here. It was a series of basins that took runoff from this catch basin and pipe and kind of managed it, without erosion down to the lake. In addition to fixing these infiltration steps, we were showing here a bioretention basin. So there is quite a bit of runoff coming through those steps, and it's erosive. You might have noticed in the photograph where it comes over here, there's some erosion. So we're proposing to capture that in that grassy area just downhill of the steps there. On each of these designs, there's, and let's see if this one, we might have to wait till the end. There's, in addition to a plan view and a layout of the project, there's also details showing, like for example, what I just said about retrofitting those steps or installing a basin to receive that runoff. There's some drawings that illustrate what that looks like. They're kind of engineering drawings, so they don't have much color, but they show us, or would show a contractor, how to build it. Okay, this next project is FCR2, which is 1317 Ferncliff. And this is a picture I found. I mentioned I was going back through photographs. This is one that I found in May 2019. I think this was right after a pretty good storm. And Ferncliff Road is would be in the background, me taking this photo. And there is some runoff from the uphill area that I'll jump to the plan view here, from the road that comes down, and it's really steep. So, you're seeing quite a bit of erosion here in the driveway, really coming straight at the house. To the right-hand side here, which is kind of can't see so well in the photograph, there's a little area where this runoff kind of comes down, and we're showing again a small, what we call bioretention basin. It's basically a small basin that has plants and has a small depression in the ground sized to receive the runoff that would come into it, slow it down, capture some of the sediment and the nutrients that would be coming in there, and prevent those sediments and nutrients from going down to the lake. So, I guess as I move along, I'll pause maybe at the end of each one and see if there are any comments from anybody or questions, or if anybody has a yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I brought copies of each of the designs, so you're welcome to take them back to your neighbors if you'd like. Yep. You're a good. Okay. All right, this next one is FCR 3, and this is at 1249 Ferncliff. This is, I'm actually going to go back to the overview real quick. Sorry to jump around, but it is important to think about the watersheds. So now we're moving, we just looked at these two, and now we're moving down here. And this section of Ferncliff has always been problematic in terms of the volume of flow that comes down, and the town has managed it in different ways. There's kind of like a concrete ditch that's in not so great condition. It gets a lot of runoff coming down from Ivy Lane as well, and I'll show you in a map in a minute that shows, a ditch on the uphill side of Ivy Lane. So all of this runoff comes down Ferncliff. It's around 10 acres or even getting up to 12 acres as you go down to the final project site. And there's very little room along the road right of way to manage the stormwater. It's very tight and typical of, our lakes, shorelines in Vermont. It's, you've got dwellings, wells, septic systems. The road is very tight to try to manage stormwater. So in this case, I'll hop back again. We're really working with the space that we have. And again, this is 1249 Ferncliff. There's, I don't know if you can see it, there's a well in the background right there. This is like a little parking boat storage area, I think, a couple culverts. But there is a little bit of space right here, and it would take a little bit of earthwork and some stone to retain a steeper slope here to create a little bit of storage. And really, you can see from this photo, a lot of sediment comes down, right? And the town has to manage that as that sediment accumulates in the ditch. And so if we create more intentional places along those ditches for the sediment to accumulate in like a single spot, it makes the town's job easier to manage that sediment. And it also takes some of the pressure off the erosion, going down the drainage. So this one here, oops. Yeah, actually, in a moment, I'll show you the layout, the plan view. But this is the next one in series. So all that runoff goes past that site, and it eventually goes way down past this property, which is 1211 Ferncliff, And so this is looking east, and all that runoff on the north side of Ferncliff eventually crosses the road and makes its way out to a ditch through a series of culverts that are really old and hard to follow. Honestly, we've walked out there a few times, and so the idea with this practice is that we would divert some of the stormwater, a small portion of the stormwater, into this space here. So that would require a manhole that would, like a catch basin manhole, that would take a certain percentage of this flow, because this space could not handle all the flow that's coming down that ditch. And it would divert it through a smaller pipe into this area, which is just off the right of way. And here, so now going back to the first one that I pointed out, the smaller practice, again, those wells in the that were in the background of that photograph. This is really a pretty small practice, but useful one along this drainage path here. And the photograph I just showed is this area here on the north side of the plan. This is the driveway. There's a catch basin that exists here with a pipe out to the lake. We've not found that outlet. Okay. That would be helpful. The idea would be, again, there'd be a manhole structure here that would divert a portion of the runoff under the road in a pipe, and it would come in and infiltrate or be filtered. We still have to do a bit more soils exploration here. There is ledge in the area. We know from looking at the wastewater plans. But it would come into this, again, an infiltration basin or a bioretention basin, and then it would have an outlet pipe that would take it and connect it to that existing catch basin. So this basin would be sized, appropriately to receive only the volume that would come, would be all sort of siphoned off the road, if you will, off of the ditch. And then, of course, all the pipes that would connect down, we'd need to make sure that they could accommodate that flow as well as any other flow coming in directly from the driveway or the area around the house. And I'm just going to jump ahead. We have a bunch of details, again, like I mentioned, that illustrate what we're talking about here. If you want to dig into that more. Any questions on that one?
It'll be on our website, and we'll have a recording of the meeting. And I can write the website down for that. Okay. The next project area I want to talk about was Ivy Lane. And this is a private drive that comes off of Ferncliff Road and goes up a steep hill. This is a photo from fall 2024. This is a plan showing Ivy Lane. And again, I mentioned there's an existing ditch on the west side of the road. So this is all kind of steep area upslope that in a big storm would run off in this direction toward Ivy Lane. And all that runoff would get picked up in this ditch on the uphill side of Ivy Lane and be carried down where it meets Ferncliff and comes under a culvert and then carries on down that problematic drainage I mentioned a minute ago. So all of this runoff would also commingle, if you will. It'd be part of the treatment that we're talking about at 1211 Ferncliff. But again, this is more runoff than this area could handle, so only a portion of it would have to be diverted off. On Ivy Lane, it's a pretty narrow road. It's about 12 feet, which is typical of a private drive.
we thought there could be some improvements in crowning the road a bit better to get a portion of or half of the road to run off into this forested area rather than, maybe more of it coming into the ditch. And then we're showing a couple of cross culverts that don't exist out there now that could divert some of the flow into this forested area, which does have a slope, and does slope, I will note, does all slope down to 1264 Ferncliff. So we would need to make sure, and this is something we looked at as we stood up there on Ivy Lane and thought about better distributing some of this runoff, because if we can get the runoff coming down Ivy Lane to be better distributed, rather having it all come down to Ferncliff, that would allow some of it to infiltrate and kind of out in the woods and would take some of the pressure off those areas downstream. We would only be doing that, and again, this is a conceptual design, and this being private property and a private road, we'd want the owner's input. And we'd also want to be sure we have input from this owner here, and that we're being careful not to send too much water down the hill toward their home, especially, I don't even know, for example, if this owner has any water issues. That would be good to know. Okay. Is that, I actually can't picture the front of it. It's 1264. It's the, oh, yep.
The old whorehouse. They have not had it.
Okay.
We've had problems with every time the rain, stone and everything coming from Ivy Lane takes over.
Sure. Yeah. I think some of those photos of the sediment accumulating in the ditch on Ferncliff is originating from there. Yep.
Ivy had to bring his bobcat to clear the stones off.
Okay. Yeah, so this would, again, divert a portion of the runoff, for example, that's coming down in this area to here. It would send it across the road, and we're calling for stable, what we call turnouts. So basically some stone at the outlet of the culvert, so it wouldn't just blast into the woods and cause erosion. Okay.
Some of the drainage down, and so we started.
Oh, you did. Okay. Okay.
So
Yep. Good. Good to know. Any further questions on this one? Comments? Okay. So again, these are, I'm not going to get too deeply into these. These are just details that show, for example, here's a bio, and it's probably too small for you to see anyways, but if you do get online to look at these, or you take a hard copy of the plans, you can study them. It's just showing, typically when you have an infiltration basin or a bioretention basin, you want what's called a forebay ahead of that. So that's where you're trying to capture any of the suspended sediment or the coarser sediment that's, the high velocity stormwater is carrying, and you want to settle that out so it doesn't, get into your treatment area. So, and this is where the forebay is where you would do your most frequent maintenance. So be it a shovel or a backhoe. Yep. Good question. So as part of the funding mechanism that would likely, or any funding mechanism, I feel, that would support these projects, there'd have to be a maintenance agreement, and there'd have to be some expectation. The burden isn't going to be entirely on the owner. I mean, the owners of these properties are graciously agreeing to consider hosting a water quality practice, which we appreciate. And I don't know, Hillary, is it fair to say there'd be, if it was publicly funded, there'd typically be maintenance dollars that would come along with it, or?
I think that would all be worked out prior to any design even being finalized. Would be, is there a willing maintenance partner? In some cases, the town. In some cases, the town would have incentive to, they are already cleaning out these culverts, and so they would have incentive. Often they are the partner on these projects. So they would have, they would be cleaning them out, and we would sign a maintenance agreement with them. At this, yeah.
No, that lane building work, that was trying to town is involved.
Right. So, I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but right now there is a funding source available that would pay private roads, especially if there were multiple homes off of the road, and also for maintenance on that private road. It gets sticky because now suddenly we're grading people's driveways every year. So I think we'd need to work out those details. So yeah, that would be a discussion that would need to happen. Plan between the property and the parties who help to fund or construct the project. But at this time, there is some funding available to help with that maintenance.
Thank you. Okay. Along now. Some more details. These are just showing maybe not so exciting things, just how to crown a road. Actually, this detail here is for those infiltration steps at 1373, how to better backfill them and get proper fabric holding the stone inside those pressure treated timbers to resist the flow, that's coming through there. Okay, so now we're going to continue on moving counterclockwise around the lake, and the first one is at the end of Westlake Road, or near the end. This is WL1, and the address is 3066, excuse me, 3066 Westlake Road. So this one has a pretty big drainage area. I'm going to jump to the plan first. 6 to 7 acres upslope, and there's quite a bit coming down the uphill side of Westlake. And you can see it in that photograph I just showed, which again is from 2018. There's no real stable ditch for all that runoff to come down. There's sort of like an eroded conveyance along the fence line, and then it goes into a culvert here underneath some usable space at the end of the fence off the photo there, before it then goes down into the lake. So this is looking at the lake, obviously, and this is same spot turned and looking uphill. So Westlake Road is up here, and the runoff comes through 2 culverts, one under Westlake Road, another under the driveway right below it. So again, in plan view here, the layout, what I just described, here's Westlake Road, culvert under the town road, a little steep section where flow comes out of the culvert into the next culvert under the driveway, and then down. So this is sort of an existing conditions plan and a proposed plan together. It's showing where the drainage is now. This red line is the eroded ditch. And this white line is the fence that you saw in that photograph. And I will point out, and whether the owner's here or wants to comment later, we did notice, where is it? No, I'm sorry, that's on the next one. We found a property pin. These parcel lines that are shown on here, I'm just going to point out for this plan and others, they're the best available parcel lines that we have from the state. They're not a survey of your property. They're usually pretty close, but there may be errors. In other words, if sometimes we see these approximate parcel lines that towns compile all the information and they send it to the state, it becomes a statewide database that anyone can use. But it's only so good as whatever the source was that the town compiled. So a land surveyor, a licensed land surveyor who would actually like do a survey and locate your boundary is very different from this. Although in most cases, we'd expect it to be close. So if you see some discrepancies, that may be why. So we think the property line is right along the fence. And what we're showing here are a series of steps and pools for that stormwater to slow down and dissipate the energy as it goes on its way to the lake. And it would mean that that fence would need to be, either the fence would need to be slid over or the practice would need to kind of work around it. The fence is at the low point in the landscape. So it'd be hard to, the practice would either have to be here or the fence slid over a little bit. And there's some drawings of these steps and pools and using stone to slow that flow down, and then plantings around the perimeter of the pools. Any questions on that one before I move on? All right. Next one, further south on Westlake Road. This is 930 Westlake Road. Oh, well, hang on. That's what I wrote down on my notes, although this says near 100 Westlake Road.
I do have a question on the previous one.
You have a question? Yeah,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Where it comes off the road, the previous plan there, before it even gets to the fence, there's a big area there that can be utilized.
You didn't have a picture of that at all,
And that's not in any of the pictures here.
where it comes under the road.
Okay, so I've gone back to the slide I think you want to see. And here's the town road.
It's not
And
a road.
oh, I'm sorry. Is Westlake Road private there?
That's the private road, yes.
Okay, so transitions from, got it. Okay, my bad. All right, there's the private road, Westlake Road. Here's the culvert. And there's a small, well, what I would consider a small area in between the two culverts. Maybe based on the scale of the map here. Oh, I'm realizing you can't see my
I cannot.
No,
my pointer. If I can do it. Can you see my pointer? Oh, geez.
I can now, yeah.
Can you see my pointer?
Yep.
I can.
Okay. So this area, what I was just pointing out, here's a culvert under the private road. And these yellow lines are contours, so they show they're 1 foot contours. Uh-oh. Hopefully you all can still see. We just lost our screen here in the room, but
I can see the screen.
the folks see it. Okay. So this area that I'm pointing to now is maybe, well, certainly less than 20 feet in between those two culverts. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And steep, right? There's stone there now.
There's some, yeah. And then
Yep.
the other question I have is on the other side of the road, before it comes under the road, there's
Okay.
a very large area there with stone in it.
Yep.
Which to me would make sense to incorporate that into the infiltration at the source before it comes under the road, because it's all coming down the road.
Sure.
And there's a large area there.
Let me just point to it now. Whoops. Oh, jeez. When I try to move this cursor, it wants to move the slide. That's why I'm not doing it. You're talking about right in here.
Yes, and we've been putting riprap in there, which has helped. But to me, remediation should start there. That's the steepest part of the road, and the water's coming down the road, and that's the low point.
I think that's a good comment. I do remember looking at that area and thinking that
Yeah, I mean,
there's a
in a storm, the water rushes down to that point and then
Sure.
comes under the road. So it would make sense to remediate there and then do smaller remediation after it crosses under.
Okay. I think, yeah, I think what would be valuable, and I guess this goes for this project or any others. Again, this is a concept design. Your input is definitely we want. And I think your comment is received. I'll just say, and we can talk about this more perhaps on a on-site visit if we want to do that to talk about it further. This area does have a really steep slope on one side. And so when I looked at it, I didn't think there was a lot of room to expand the space to receive that water because of that steep slope. I think just to let you know what my thinking was at the time, I can certainly give it another look. Or maybe there's opportunity to do something here and make anything that would happen down gradient of it smaller, I think is kind of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and then as it comes under the road, there's an area there where it could be remediated again before it even gets to the fence.
And that picture's on the web, on your Lake St. Catherine website, that picture is included there because that's where it really, it's like a waterfall there.
Yeah. Are you talking about right here where my cursor is? Or are you
Yes.
talking about down here?
No, right where your cursor was
In between the two culverts. Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. So we can certainly look at that. Again, my take on that space was that it's very small. It's about maybe 10 to 12 feet in between those two culverts, at least based on the scale here on the map. So I think some of the stone in there could be reconfigured, and we're actually showing that in this call out, install large stone grade controls. So we were thinking about stabilizing that better, but honestly, there's probably not a lot of space there to create volume to slow.
It could be expanded.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we should look at that further and make a site visit, I think, and talk through that. So
Thank you.
yes. Okay. Okay. In that spot that I was just pointing to there, or between the two culverts. Okay. Good.
I
Good
couldn't hear the comment.
The comment was the landowner to the north might be willing to accommodate, like if slowing the stormwater down in this area. I think what you were suggesting is that perhaps the project could expand.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
And the landowner would be receptive there. I think that's what I heard.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Moving on. Right. I was unsure about this address. I guess we'll find out in a minute. This says, I think my colleague was helping me put some of these slides together, or maybe Jeremy, you wrote this. I don't know. I didn't write this. Sorry. I wrote down 930 Westlake Road based on looking at parcel maps. So if somebody in a minute recognizes the site and has the right address that you want to volunteer, please chime in. So I'm going to jump ahead to the plan view. This is also a pretty good sized drainage area. It's 10 acres and definitely public road here, I assume, at this point. Runoff is coming down off of the hillside and some homes and driveways up here, and it all gets picked up in a pretty deep ditch along the west side of Westlake Road and comes under a culvert, town culvert, 18-inch metal pipe, and then comes into a swale that almost looks like a stream. It's, it shows that when you look at it, I'll go back to the photograph. It looks like it receives a lot of flow. So this is a photo from the fall. You don't see it all that well, but if you walked up in here, there's quite a bit of erosion on the banks. And I didn't put a photograph. There's a footbridge just behind the shrubs in this photo that's got some erosion around it. So this channel gets a lot of runoff from upslope. It's eroded. And what I like about this project is, especially, it's right there by the lake. So any erosion that happens is going right to the lake. And this is a great opportunity to mitigate that. So what we're talking about is pretty simple, actually. Regrading the banks, sloping the banks back so they're on a more stable slope. Right now they're close to vertical, and they have exposed soil down near the toe of the bank where the water's flowing. And it's not flowing year round per se. It's like more of an intermittent stream. So this shows kind of a swath of that work, and the green hatch would be plantings that would go that would be done after the banks are sloped back. And I'll show a drawing in a minute that illustrates that. This is the site. Yeah, it says 930 Westlake Road there. So a minute ago, I was making a comment about the parcel lines, and this is one where the dark black lines are the parcel data that we get from the state, but we did observe a property pin here that seemed, if we drew it in line with the black line to the south here, the project would appear to straddle possibly two properties. So I just wanted to point that out. It appears to fall on 930 Westlake Road, but 914 Westlake Road is certainly involved, and maybe even some of the equipment access it would seem would be best down this way from 914 Westlake Road. And we're not talking about, huge equipment, but a small excavator to shape the banks back and make them stable. And here are some drawings that illustrate that. The upper left, the thin black line represents the existing grade, so you can kind of see it's a vertical bank. And this shows the bank slope back on what we call a 2-on-1 slope. So for every one foot vertical, it's 2 foot horizontal. And different practices that we often spec in these designs, you see these circles down at the toe of the slope. This is one option we could use. It's a coconut fiber roll. It's really densely wound coconut fiber from coconut husk. It's pretty neat. It's really resistant to erosion. It's biodegradable, but it takes a long time to decompose. And you can do plantings around and through it. So the roots of the plants will grow into that material as it decomposes. So it kind of provides a buffer on the toe of the bank as everything's getting stable, and prevents that toe from eroding. And there's some other details that are too small for you all to see here with just plantings and some check dams, if that's a possibility. We need to look at that some more. Any questions on this one? Any questions online? Okay. How are we doing on time? Are we, did you allot an hour or hour and a half? Hour and a half? Okay. All right. I think we're maybe like 3/4 of the way through. Just Channel Drive. So we're continuing around the lake. Channel Drive, if any of you live there, you know there's a lot of runoff issues along it. There's, again, similar themes, steep slopes and runoff coming down the hillside. These are some pictures we took during our assessment. And on this one, we did more of a scoping study of the whole road and the culverts, and identified a few project areas. And one of those project areas got advanced as part of the Lake Watershed Action Plan. So that's a separate design. That's also a conceptual design that we went over in a previous meeting that I'm not going to show tonight, but it's available. That's 139 Channel Drive. So we looked at the upslope watersheds that come down to the east and again get caught in that ditch on the west side of Channel Drive. And in some places, there's culverts that convey that runoff through the properties to the east, again, around really tight spaces with dwellings and septic systems and wells. Not a lot of space to accommodate and slow that water down on the properties themselves. And here's actually a better overview map where we were looking at the watersheds all the way to the top of the hill where there'd been some clearing done in, I think we determined it was around 2016 based on the maps. And you probably can't see them, but there are different colors on each of these culverts. And those, if you do end up studying this, on your own time, there are different colors indicating how properly sized or undersized the culverts are based on the contributing area upslope. So anything that's red is an undersized culvert, yellow is borderline, and green is okay. So I think I'll move on from that because there's a lot to digest here, and if you want to get into it further.
Eric, can I, excuse me, I
Yes.
live on Channel Drive.
Okay.
I've been part of this with Hillary, etc. I just want to say my neighbor mentioned we need to crown the road so that the water goes into the culverts, which also need to be dug out. And so that's our main concern because there's culverts, but unfortunately they're filled in and they're grown in and they're not being dug out.
Maintained.
And so
Okay.
just what I wanted to mention is one of the concerns for my neighbor.
Great.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
Yep.
it really needs to be recrowned. The road, it sends it all down my driveway, which goes directly into the lake
Okay.
and to my neighbors. Okay?
Thank
Thanks.
you. We will
Okay.
relay that to the town.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right. Clayton Tract. This is a town road. Is that correct? Okay. So I confirm. So this is the south side of Clayton Tract where it comes around to North Street. Is that right? And this photograph is looking west or southwest. North Street would be up the hill, and this is coming down. We noticed there's a group of us here, this photograph, they're looking at some erosion over this side around this utility pole. So there's some runoff that comes down, flowing east along the road and kind of pitches over the south side of the road, and there's some erosion over there. Our thought, and meanwhile, there's other runoff that's coming down into a not very well defined swale, but there is a swale here that directs this water here. We're really curious about this one. I'll go to the plan view. There was a mapped culvert here on this inside bend where I was just pointing to in the photograph, in the grassy area on the right-hand side of the photograph. There was a culvert mapped here that existed in a prior culvert assessment that I think the Regional Planning Commission did for the town. We could not find it. And so if anybody knows whether that culvert exists or not, we'd be interested to know. But what we're showing here is crowning the road in a way that would direct more of the flow to the north into that swale, or maybe the swale would be slightly better defined to take that water and bring it down to a bioretention basin, similar to what I was talking about before, a small planted depression in the ground. And I guess the trick here would be, how do we get the water from over here across? It's already doing that. It's already pooling in this area, going back to the photograph. We didn't see any evidence of it having overflowed recently, when we've been there. But if we're going to direct more water to this area, obviously we need to accommodate it and get it safely across the road. So we're curious about that. This project would take a little bit more follow-up in the final design to figure out that outlet. So. And again, some details showing what that would look like. Any questions? Okay. All right, Locklear Lane. I found these photos from May 2019, and we were just out there recently, pretty recently, last year, I think, with the owner. And I definitely saw some erosion in this ditch that's in between the properties, but it looked pretty bad in this photo. So just a reminder that a lot of water comes down Locklear Lane and comes through this culvert into the wooded area, and has the potential to cause erosion. Here's that same time frame and a ditch where we have a practice designed here. So these two areas were targeted in the design. Here again is an overview map. The purple lines are the drainage areas, pretty big hill slope that comes down, approaching a little over 3 acres, and splits. Some of that flow goes around in a ditch around the driveway and down below. Some of it shoots through the woods. In the woods, we were, this design shows getting some wood check dams in that ditch, the picture of the ditch I just showed. And the reason for that, instead of stone, would be to get a machine in here and try to place stone in there would cause a lot of disruption on a steep slope. There's a lot of nice trees in there. So we have designed and overseen installation of these wood check dams. They do take more time to build. They're usually done by a crew of hand labor. The Youth Conservation Corps in the past has done this on some projects we worked on. And you're basically getting, in lieu of stone, you're getting these log check dams that are held in place by posts, spaced appropriately along that channel to slow that flow down and mitigate the erosion. Also, where the flow comes down the steep area and then spreads out in the woods, it's already kind of doing that nicely. But this design shows enhancing that natural effect that's going on now. So placing downed logs perpendicular to the flow to get the flow to spread out better and some of that sediment to drop out and kind of get captured in the woods. Right next to it, to the north, flow comes around into that ditch you saw in the previous photo. And this would be the green hatch is again a bioretention basin, taking about 2 acres. And here's a little closer look of it. And I think even a closer look in this nice illustration here coming around. We would put some stone into the slope to gain a little space and retain the slope in order to have, you know, a basin that could accommodate that flow. Again, all of these have, like I mentioned, the 4 bays. So, you know, there's a lot of sediment coming down. You want to capture that in an area to be treated and then keep it out of your main basin. There is a companion design on the other property to the south that I don't have up here, but we could pull it up from after we get through this one at another time if you want to see those details. All right, Cones Point. This is 60. There wasn't an address for the property on the left-hand side of the photo on the parcel mapping that I was looking at, but 676. This is at the end of Cones Point Road in the cul-de-sac. We have a partner that's working on this project with us. All the designs that you've seen so far were developed by Fitzgerald Environmental, me and my colleagues. One of our partners that works with us occasionally on these projects is called SLR. They're another engineering firm, and we tapped them to kind of spread out the load of these designs. So SLR designed this one, and then the one on Route 30 that I'll show after this. This is a small contributing area, basically kind of the crest of Cones Point Road, just a little back from the cul-de-sac. Again, these purple lines show the contributing area. This is a challenging spot. It's not a big contributing area, but again, we were looking at what could be done on Cones Point Road. And there are some spaces here. It might take a little bit of vegetation manipulation or even a little bit of cutting of some small saplings to fit in some bioretention basins at the end. Again, it's tight. There's a propane tank here. There's some other utilities. This shows like a best fit design for taking some of this runoff that comes down the end and treating it before it, you know, continues on toward the houses. And we did see some erosion, you know, evidence of flow kind of creating some nuisance erosion, you know, in the driveways and around the property. So this would help with that. And this, Jessica Luisos is the engineer who was working on this. She shows an alternative, so there are 2 options here if you want to study them, one at the very end of the cul-de-sac and one off to the side. And this would require like diverting with a water bar, diverting some of that flow that's, you know, flowing west and kicking that flow to the south. And some details of what that looks like. Any questions in the room or online on that one? All right, we're on the last one. Gave it away with the Cluckin' Cafe. Don't need to tell you the address, I don't think. These are photographs from 2018. There's a pretty good sized contributing area from drainage area from the state highway that there is a crown in the middle of the road, and it I believe it's crowned in the middle. and I'll show you in a minute on the plan. And it all comes down, and some of it pools in front of the building and the parking area, and then it carries on into the woods. And I take that back. The road is not crowned. It's all sloped this way toward the parking lot. So let's see. It's about a half-acre drainage inside this purple line. And right now, this flow it picks up a lot of sediment. You probably saw from the photos as it shoots over the gravel. And then it just shoots into the woods here. And this is a wetland. So in some ways, there's already treatment happening naturally in the wetland. That wetland is filtering that runoff. It's slowing down. It's very flat. There's vegetation. But it would help the lake to have a better, man-made filter, if you will, on the edge of the parking lot. That's what that green blob is shown there. And there's a bunch of gravel that's kind of accumulated in the woods there. So it would be working within that prior disturbed area and staying out of the wetland itself. Because wetlands are actually really useful and functional in treating runoff. We think about them as the kidneys of the landscape because they filter runoff for us naturally. So we don't want to mess with that wetland, but we want to enhance the treatment as it goes. And again, here is some details of the little settling area. And I believe that's it.